We're Dynamic Logistics, the food shipping experts. What makes us food shipping experts? Glad you asked. First, we've built a well-connected, highly reliable food-grade carrier network that significantly improves OTIF compliance, streamlines delivery management, and complies with food-grade requirements like trailer washouts and seal processes. We know what food shippers really need, a dedicated account team to offer critical after-hours support. Dynamic Logistics, the food shipping experts.
Welcome to Running on Ice, the coolest community in freight. I'm your host, Mary O'Connell, bringing you the latest tech updates, warehouse news, and everything happening in the cold chain world. Not only is there the coolest show in freight, but there's also Running on Ice, the newsletter that could not be colder. You can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. Today, we welcome back George Shergan, Chief Client Officer at Dynamic Logistics. Thank you so much for joining us again, George.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
I am excited to get into today. We have not talked about this in a hot minute on the show, and that is all things produce season. I know we're kind of gearing up towards the end of it, but it's still really important to talk about because it is one of those, it happens hot and heavy and it hits different markets in the US at different times, obviously. So before we get too far into that, let's get some background on you and kind of how you got started at Dynamic Logistics.
Yeah, sure. No, I've been in transportation and logistics since 2006. So been in the 3PL space most of my career. So basically from the carrier side to the client side to the analytical side, been really involved in every aspect you can think of when it comes to understanding and trying to evaluate a customer's supply chain. So, but I came to DLX in 2021. I was previously at a different 3PL and decided to come over here in 2021 to help manage the client health department. So really our goal here is to kind of evaluate a customer supply chain and what can we do to kind of evaluate that and evolve that solution over a time period, right? Not necessarily let's put 3-year contract in place and let's just let it ride. I mean, our goal here is to really continue to evaluate that, evolve the solution, provide KPI and BI data, look at the carrier solution and really trying to drive something that'll work for the customer from a continuous perspective, not just a short-term thing. We really want to make sure we're evolving that and finding opportunities within our clients that might change some of the dynamics on how they ship their product, but ultimately it's going to keep them fresh in the market and making sure they're competitive with their carriers as well as their other customers.
As someone with a background in 3PLs, I absolutely love that that's the approach that you guys take because a lot of companies won't exactly go that extra mile. They'll say, oh, we've signed a 3-year contract. Thank you so much. We will do exactly as provided in that contract. A lot of times I've noticed that people are almost kind of scared to go back to the customer and maybe say, hey, we're seeing some issues here. Hey, we're having some problems in this area. And I always wonder why everyone's so scared to talk to their customers. And they're like, oh, I just don't want to bother them. And I'm like, you're not bothering them. You're doing the service that they're paying you to do. Like, that's something I've never understood. So I'm glad that you guys have definitely leaned into that.
For sure. Yeah. Our goal is obviously to be an extension of their business. So whatever we can do to help them think outside the box and come and be creative and overall their supply chain, that's really what we want to be doing.
I think that's better for everyone because you don't want to consistently have a customer that all of a sudden in November says, hey, we're opening up a new warehouse for peak season and it's only going to be around for 2 months. All that pricing that we have is still totally valid for this location, even though nobody knew about it until the truck showed up and said, I think I'm supposed to deliver here. Just little things like that.
That's right.
All right. So getting into the topic of the hour, and that is produce season. We are kind of in the thick of it. I think we might be kind of done in Florida. I might be wrong. Don't quote me on it, but I know we just kind of move up the United States. We are deep in, we haven't quite hit corn, but we are getting near apples here in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's in my opinion, one of the hardest commodities to ship and source and kind of handle everything for, because it's so much preparation and so much work to just sit around, not necessarily sit around and wait, but kind of sit around and wait, because you have to say, okay, we have to wait, maybe next week, maybe Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. No, it's too wet in the morning. We can't do that. So for me, that makes it infinitely more challenging because you need to have those drivers and those carriers and that capacity there at
Yep.
a moment's notice, but also you can't just have them sitting idle waiting around because then nobody's making money. So why is it that produce is so complicated? Because also once you pick it up, you have a very finite window on how quickly you can get it there. Because
Yep.
obviously you don't want the food to spoil.
Yeah, I think you hit it when you mentioned the fact of, the last minute loads, or the fact that there is a shelf life with that product. So the second you get that load of that tender, you're on a time, right? Your clock is starting to tick on when you can get that product moving, and it's urgent to that time, because ultimately you don't get it there, you could spoil the whole product, right? Or ruin the whole product based off of those requirements that are being put. So that is the challenge. That's what makes it tough. Ultimately, making sure that you have the right carrier that's going to meet the transit time for that customer, right? You might find a carrier, but it might take them a little bit longer than what they need based on the shelf life. So that's can lead to tough lead times, like we talked about, and then some of those service requirements just based off of clean trailers and making sure that particular vendor or shipper will accept that particular carrier shipping in, because they had an issue with them in the past. So it's a big process of really vetting that carrier base and ensuring that you're putting the right carriers on the mix that you have, and you're committing to the volume if you can, but ultimately having those carriers that have been through the process so that you're ready to go when being asked to book that load.
One of the things I always wondered, because it's pretty much like a universal standard across any shipper that does food, and that is the like the clean trailer, or making sure you have a
Mhm.
washout before you go in. There are so many carriers that I've seen have gotten passed up on loads, or they're just saying, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
doing the washout. Why are so many carriers hesitant to do a washout for a load that they know is like obviously going to make them money?
Yeah, sometimes they're not getting paid for it too. Like a lot of times there's distraction just based off it's out of route miles, or they don't feel like they're going to get the recoup the money from it. We work with a lot of our core carriers on anticipating that and building that into, if we need to, from a cost perspective, so they're accounting for it. And again, a lot of times when they even get the washout, a lot of times they can still be denied, maybe based off some sort of odor or something that's going on with that particular load that shipper won't put it on their product. So they've been burned in the past too, unfortunately, in some of those situations. So it's just really working with them and setting the table prior to going live with that carrier on that customer, walking them through the operational requirements. If there's a potential opportunity to do a site visit with that carrier and kind of walk through the process, that always helps in preparation for anticipated issues or anticipated things that are required from that particular shipper. So there's just a lot of things you can do on the front end to help hopefully eliminate right risk or potential opportunities that could go wrong. But it is freight. We are in the freight world, so nothing is perfect. But we want to make sure that we're at least doing our homework on the front end, and qualifying those carriers and ensuring they know the operational requirements before we go live.
I think that's a really good point because you guys really take that partnership aspect of it and say, like, we're not just doing a transactional nature where I'm asking you to haul a load, you haul a load, money's like, here's the money, have a nice day. You guys really say, no, we're in this for a partnership. And I think that, kind of coming in with that sort of mentality means that you're going to find carriers that also have that mentality and aren't necessarily going to just be like, nah, man, I just want to haul some strawberries and then go on about my day.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So with seasonal peaks and shifting kind of harvest windows, because like you said, it's region by region, and just because maybe we're done in Alabama means that we're going to go up to like Arkansas or Southwest Missouri. That's not necessarily like, oh, I spend 3 days here and then I go 2 days here and then I go this. It's not necessarily a guarantee that the following week you're going to move up to the next like kind of level of latitude or longitude. So how do you kind of say, okay, this is how we're going to keep our carriers involved, this is how we're going to keep our shippers going on something that resembles a schedule without having to say, okay, hurry up and do oranges now, and then okay, hurry up and now we're going to do apples or strawberries or something like that, where you're just kind of more or less doing the hurry up and wait game in each market as you move up throughout the season?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I think ultimately, again, I've kind of talked about it, but committing to volume and working with those carriers and mapping out what that plan would look like. So ultimately, their trucks are continuing to run or moving down the road, or the anticipated date of when that's going to happen. Because you're right, you don't want to ask a carrier to price freight and then you never give them the freight, or it takes weeks or months for them to lock in. Then you're dealing with capacity issues and crunches where they might be looking outside of you, right, to fulfill that need because they have to get their trucks moving, right? So we want to make sure that we're working with those carriers. We have a bunch of carriers from a corpus perspective that we work on the contract side of our business, as well as on the brokerage side of our business, to making sure that we're securing capacity. We're looking at and reviewing the pricing, making sure that that pricing is competitive, not just to what the cheapest cost in the marketplace is, but really making sure we're staying close to where the market average is and making sure we're paying that carrier that is going to make sure they're making money on that load, but ultimately driving cost competitive pricing back to the customer. Again, our goal is not the cheapest carrier. Let's put it on the load and let's make sure that freight gets there on time. Our goal is to make sure that we're putting a quality carrier in place. We've committed to the volume. We're partnering with them from a long-term perspective. So when the market does flip, and we all know this market does go in cycles, right? It goes up, it goes down. Our goal is to commit with those carriers to when it does change, we have built a relationship with them. They know that the volume is going to be there consistent. They know that they're not going to have to lower their rates 30% to stay in the volume. They know that we're going to commit to them based off of those parameters and that relationship we've built with them. And then also fair scorecarding. We've got to make sure that it's not just an evaluation of you had one issue, and then we're going to move you out of that lane from now on. It's a fair scorecard that is shared and discussed with the customer, right, as well as the carrier. Ultimately, that we're all aligned on those expectations we put in place, whether it's acceptance rates, right, on-time delivery at pickup, on-time delivery at the delivery point, right? So all those are key stats, whether it's even claims, right, claims ratio perspective. But it's a fair scorecard. It's looking at multiple different factors when appointments are made versus when the actual shipment had to be arrived, right, based on the customer request. But there's a lot of factors that go into it that's shared across the board so that carrier feels like they're being awarded correctly, but also being measured correctly.
I kind of like that component because a lot of times I have sat in many of the carrier scorecard reviews of, oh no, this isn't right. I was like, this appointment wasn't missed. It was just a miscommunication. I'm getting unfairly punished. All those, but it helps that there's more than just, oh well, you missed this appointment, you missed this. It helps that there's more context added, so that way it doesn't just necessarily feel like an attack on the carrier of like, oh, you're not good enough, you're not hitting these arbitrary standards, and you're like, no, you are, and here's all the options that we've given you, and here's areas that you could improve on, but here's areas that you guys succeed very well in. And I do like that you guys have that balanced approach as opposed to just, well, you missed this appointment 3 times, so you're gone.
Yep. And in fairness too, it's really good for the shipper because as they are being targeted in the market to move freight or product for them on behalf of them, they are also being measured, right, from a carrier perspective. So their scorecards and shipper of choices are real. They're in the marketplace, and carriers want to work with those customers that are going to be fair. So that's why we want to make sure we're aligning that structurally so that the customer understands the expectations, the carrier understands the expectations, and we're kind of aligned. Because ultimately, we don't want one finger pointing at the other, and because they messed up one time, they're out of the solution. That's not the solution that's going to secure your capacity when capacity gets tight. You've got to work with them, making sure that they're aligned, but ultimately know that they're measuring you just as much as you're measuring them. So.
Yeah, there are definitely a few loads that I've called on, and by the time, and like I've known it's been not a great shipper, and the second I'm like, oh yeah, it's like this person's facility, I just get hung up on. And you're like, this is super great, shipper, you're really helping yourself out here.
Yep.
So obviously we don't want that for anybody. So if I am a shipper that is, shipping the time critical things, having, if I'm going straight from the tree or the plant or wherever it's getting harvested to a grocery warehouse or to the grocery store itself or to where it needs to go, how often do I need to be, going through these carrier vetting tools? How often do I need to be reviewing my carriers before every produce season, or do I need to be doing it during produce season? So that way I know that I'm working with carriers that have my best interests at heart, are aligned on the same goals as me. And then also not necessarily, obviously not a fraudulent carrier, because food and beverage fraud is the top category.
Yeah, I would definitely, again, seasonality or market can vary that kind of strategy based on what's happening in the market, but at least a couple months prior to going into that produce season, give yourself a good 2 to 3 month window working with those carriers. It doesn't have to be a full-fledged RFP necessarily. I'm going out and asking all lanes to be priced. It can be a strategic RFP on lanes where you maybe have capacity needs or the cost has gone up and you really need to work on those carriers and trying to drive down costs. So it can be a multiple factors that go into that strategy. But giving yourself that window before going into produce season will, one, hopefully secure the capacity you need, right? Making sure that carrier is getting awarded the freight they want. And it's going to keep you aligned where the market is from a cost perspective, because obviously it's a very competitive marketplace. And we don't want carriers to get compliant either. And compliance, like, okay, I've been moving this all the time. I don't need to give you a rate change. I know I'm going to get it. We have to keep them competitive to what's going on in the market as well. And again, it's a fair discussion. It's open discussion with both parties involved, aligning that strategy so that carrier knows that there might be some gives on some lanes, but takes on some others. But ultimately, it drives that capacity and that drives that opportunity for that customer to help mitigate costs. But again, very cyclical, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same every year. It can be varied based on what's going on in the market, but it is a strategic goal at least 2 to 3 months prior to going live in that busy season.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because that's when I'm starting to look, okay, well, who did really well for me last year?
Mm-hmm.
Who's still around? Is this carrier even still hauling produce? Because I know a lot of times carriers after a season will go like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Or, oh, I'm going to move on to insert other industry commodity here. And you just have to check in to be like, hey, are you still interested in hauling this year? And if they are, get their schedule. I know when I worked in agriculture, when we had planting and harvest season, they were always interested in hauling, but you had to wait a couple weeks until crops got in the ground, or wait a couple weeks until it got harvested. And so then you just kind of had to work around that availability, which I feel like is a very, I don't want to say unique to food and beverage and like the agriculture, but kind of is unique to them, because a lot of like auto part manufacturers don't have that
Mm-hmm.
that have to like work around a schedule,
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely strategic, and every customer is unique. And no matter what, even if they're both shipping apples, right? That customer could be completely different on how they manufacture, ship it, produce it, send it out than the next guy, which is crazy to say, but it's reality. Everybody is unique in how they ship their product. So measuring that, working aligned with those customers and those carriers to ensure that everyone is on the same page is really critical regardless.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess when it comes to, because like you mentioned, it's important and it's vital to reevaluate those carrier standards, reevaluate your carrier pool, because when it is time to go, it is go time. So how do you, if you're a shipper, like kind of finishing up your produce season, looking back on, okay, this is what worked really well. This is what was not our strongest showing. But when we start planning for next year, what are some of those things to keep in mind in addition to, I need to have these carriers here. I need to have them ready to roll, but also I don't want to open myself to fraud or to risk. But I need to still balance that speed to market with that service. And then I'll also, that risk mitigation strategy.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because ultimately you always have to make sure it's a competitive environment for your carriers, whether it's your core carriers you're going to continue to use, or maybe there's a new carrier that has come into the mix that might provide some opportunity, right, from a cost perspective as well as a service perspective. So we are actively always pre-vetting carriers at all year long, right? So we have a database where we use a tool called RMIS, which keeps track of all the carrier requirements. We're qualifying them. We keep all our contracts in place. So they can be used on a spot market. They can be used on a contractual market with customers. So in the case of we need to move fast, we don't have a load covered based off of an RFP and we're missing that lane, we have carriers in our database that have the qualifications that have already been qualified basically to move that product. And have had some type of operational conversation around what the expectations are. But it's good to make sure you're at least monitoring that on a constant basis. It's like a pinwheel. It's something that's always going to be done, regardless if it's an active RFP or if it's one that, hey, we're building up into next year, making sure we've expanded our carrier capacity in those areas where we've seen maybe some struggles in the past. So that's where data is very much key. We want to make sure we've had that data discussion with our customers. We've identified some of the gaps based off maybe the scorecarding that we've seen from a service perspective. So we're going to specifically target carriers in that region and that niche. And that tool that we have has all those carriers that we've already pre-vetted into our technology that we can then call on and ask them, is this something you want to move? Is this something you can commit to from a capacity standpoint? Do you want to remain more of a spot carrier? But that's very important for us to use that, because that not only measures from a contract, but also measures safer scores. It also measures any kind of insurance, making sure we have qualified and have the right proper insurance documentation, because that can get overlooked. And sometimes you're moving so quick. This helps us make sure that we're aligned and that we're not assigning a carrier that is not qualified or pre-vetted through our solution.
The so it's kind of like for lack of a better analogy, it's kind of like when you call like a player up from the minor leagues, like they're already on the team, they're already a part of the club. It's just like, hey, you're gonna play over here now, and it's gonna be great for everyone involved.
Yeah, we do a really good job here. We have a carrier procurement team that is looking at the overall footprint of all of our customers, right? And how we can find synergies with our carriers, whether even if it's on the spot market, it doesn't matter. Where are the synergies we can find with those carriers that we can get them from a backhaul perspective? But that way we know that the capacity is there. That way we know the pricing is competitive. And then it's aligned with them from a long-term perspective. So we're always in the background evaluating that, regardless if we're running a bid or not. But again, you have to have some of those tools and technology to help you stay aligned. Otherwise, you could be at risk of hiring somebody that's not met the requirements. And God forbid something happens in that case, right? Because that could be catastrophic.
Yeah, we don't need, I think as an industry, we don't need more cargo theft and more cargo claims. I think we're like super good on that for a long time. I know they're going to continue to happen, but if we could just take a break, that'd be great too.
Yeah.
So that being said, I have two more questions before we end here. What is like the number one change you would love to see in the industry that could really help expedite this and make produce season like the most seamless, streamlined, beautiful situation ever, aside from obviously predicting the weather and controlling the dew point in the morning?
Yeah, that would be awesome. Ultimately, technology is going to continue, hopefully, to help change the game. I think that is really what I want to continue to see evolve and be creative in that market space. Because again, fraud is not going away. You're going to continue to have it. You're going to continue to have weather issues. You're going to continue to have things that are going to disrupt the freight market around produce. So, what tools are you surrounding with, and what technologies are out there that you can continue to use or add to your solution that help you from that risk? We've been adapting online tracking. So when you think about some of the tools that are out there, we partner with a company called Chain. And that company is really measuring and looking at trucks moving down the road, and so that we are continuing to find, if we're going to tender a load to them, let's say, right, and we know that they're 500 miles away from that load, but it needs to be picked up in 8 hours. That's not a true carrier that we want to go to, right? We have the tools to see where they are on a map when we're executing that load on behalf of that customer. So I think those things are going to get stronger, and those tools are going to get a little bit more viable in the marketplace to help the produce shipper from a strategic perspective, ensuring that carrier is there when they need that carrier. We've also been partnering with a company called GenLogs, which really gets out there, and you might have heard of that one as well. But really, from us, it's tracking that carrier and ensuring that, again, same thing as we're running a bid. They've hit those markets before in the past, and they're not just bidding on it and providing paper rates, but we've seen a trail of where that carrier has been and where they've produced in the marketplace, to where when we get pricing back from them, we know that that's valid pricing. But again, those things are new to the business. I think they're starting to develop and get a little bit stronger. That's something that we need to continue to see innovate in the marketplace. There's going to be new tools out there. One commitment you get from DLX is that we don't, like I said earlier, we just don't put a solution in place and hope for the best, right? We have these two tools now, but that doesn't mean, 6 months from now, if there's something out there that's going to help us be smarter and help our customers be smarter in the market, we're going to look into it, right? We're going to evaluate it. We're going to find if there's an opportunity for us to use that in our solution that will help drive visibility, service, and cost down for our customer.
I think that's a really, just easily achievable solution. Like, it's not asking for the world. It's not asking for the ability to control the weather and the temperature and the dew point in the morning. It's asking for just the baseline level protections for your shippers, improvements, process improvements, the whole 9 yards. And personally, I think that's like reasonably achievable over the next few years.
Yep. I agree.
So that brings us to our final question of the day. Potentially, George, this might be the hardest question you've been asked today, and we've tossed some difficult ones out at you today. But this is going to be: what is the ultimate stadium snack? 'Cause I'm going to go with baseball. What's the ultimate baseball stadium snack? Like, it is not a good day at the ballpark until you have this snack.
Now, for me, if I don't have a bag of peanuts at a baseball game when I'm watching it, right, throwing those shells on the ground, there's something about that makes it that you're at a baseball game, right? You don't see that at football games, you don't see that at basketball games. It is a baseball thing. So peanuts for me is the ultimate baseball snack, no matter what stadium I'm in.
To be fair, I like peanuts as much as the next person, but I never go like at the grocery store. I never look at a bag of
No,
peanuts and go, "Yeah, I'm gonna get that." But if you put me in a baseball stadium, oh, but those peanuts have never tasted better.
I don't know. Same thing. I don't buy them at home, only when I'm in a game.
Honestly, I think that's a deep cut. I mean, I know everyone has peanuts and stuff, but like that's a deep cut, and I appreciate it, George.
Yeah.
That's a classic.
Tough question. Appreciate it though.
I mean, there's a lot of options, especially now that the stadiums get like international
Oh
cuisine
yeah.
inside of them. So, there's so many
Yeah.
options. Like there's some baseball stadiums had like sandwiches and pizzas. Like, what is
Yeah.
this?
I was
Um,
at a game 2 weeks ago or a week ago, and in Cleveland. You mentioned Cleveland. I was in Cleveland at a baseball game, and I actually had a Reuben at a baseball game, which is completely weird. I've never had one before, but it was in the area, and I'm like, I'm gonna try that, and it was really good,
okay. I
but it's not a
can't,
baseball thing.
yeah, I would not put a Reuben down as like sandwich
No.
I expected to appear at a baseball stadium. But hey, it's 2025. Crazier things have happened. Um,
Yep.
so, George, if anyone has questions on maybe where the best place to eat peanuts in a baseball stadium are, or if
Sure.
they have questions about what we've talked about today, where can they find you outside the show?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so Google me on LinkedIn, or we can come to our website at dlx.com, dynamiclogistics.com. You can find me there. My email is gshergen, gSCHERGEN at shipdlx.com. Reach out to me. Happy to jump on a call. Have any sidebar questions with anybody that wants to just talk about produce season or shipping in general, right? Happy to talk about that, where we can help customers or help potential customers or just talk about freight, right? It doesn't even have to be a salesy type of call. I'm just here to talk about how I can make your life easier. That's the ultimate goal.
Bonus points if you're the person that ships peanuts to a baseball stadium.
That's right. We can help do that.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, I appreciate your time. Thanks for having me again.
You can catch other episodes of Running on Ice right here on FreightWaves TV, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Need more Running on Ice news? No sweat. Subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. See you on the internet.